Hello, everyone. Welcome to PM Talks, where we talk about all things project management. I am your host, Vicki Calaire. Thank you for joining us tonight. Today, we want to talk with you about projects that are in trouble. So, the title of this episode is Help, My Project is in Trouble. How to Get Your Project Back on Track. And that's something that we can encounter, maybe not all the time, but you will experience a situation here or there, or a project here or there, where you may have inherited something that is extremely behind, or you may have a project that you started from the beginning, and there are some issues that have gotten your project in trouble. And so when that happens, you need to figure out a way to get your project back on track and moving forward successfully. So let's talk about it. So what happens when you inherit a project that is in trouble, or you manage a project that takes a turn for the worse? Like I said, you could be in a situation where you're new to the project, you're a new project manager to an existing project, and that project is already behind schedule. So, whoa, you're inheriting the mess. Or you can have a project that is well over budget and you need to get it under control. Or, like I said before, there could be a huge issue that has occurred and you need money and resources and time to get it resolved. So let's talk about what you need to do in the event that you are in this type of situation. It's not fun, but hey, if you have the skills that we talked about a few weeks ago, the top 5 skills of a successful project manager, and communication is one of them, you will be able to get a handle of what's going on and turn that project around so you are moving forward proactively, successfully, and not to say that you won't have any more kinks, but you'll be able to get through it. You're back on track. So the first thing you want to do is communicate this situation, this trouble that you're in, to your stakeholders. Whenever you see something that's alarming, or even have a warning that they're of risk, that possibly there is a potential threat to the project. So whether it's a risk or you're in a situation that you know this project is in trouble, you must communicate that situation. Communicate what's going on to your stakeholders, whether it is giving them an update just to let them know, because you may not have all the answers at this point, but the flag has been raised. All of a sudden, hey, you were expecting servers to arrive at a particular location, client location, where there's this implementation, this upgrade, right? And those servers do not arrive in time for the configuration and the installation, and you have to meet a certain deadline. And the servers will not get there because there's a delay in manufacturing or with the supplier for whatever reason, and the servers will not get there until another month. So boom, you're in trouble. So my point is, there could be a situation that can arise and you need to immediately address it. So when that flag occurs, that you know, okay, there's a potential problem. When that supplier says, hey, the shipment didn't go out today and we don't know when we could possibly get it out because there has been some sort of manufacturing delay, that's your trigger. Pump your brakes, stop, let's figure out what's going on. And then come to find out they can't even get it out until 4 weeks from now. So you have an issue, communicate it. Get that information out. You may not know how to address it, how to resolve it at that time, but you need to let your stakeholders know, especially the sponsor who's paying for this particular project. Hey, everybody, there's a problem. And going back to our communication topic, in regards to one of the skills, key skills, You can communicate that in whatever form that is necessary that you have identified is the best means of communication to those particular stakeholders. But you need to let them know that there is a concern, there is an issue, there is a problem, we're in trouble. And I don't have the answers now, but we are diligently working on this to come to some sort of resolution. And we will provide an update to you within X amount of time. Give yourself a reasonable amount of time to be able to do the research and indicate when that period, that date is, and get that information to your stakeholders to say, hey, we have an issue, we have a problem, but we'll be able to give you an update by this date. This lets them know that, okay, you are working on it. You don't know the answers now, because the next thing you want to do is when you have an update, hopefully you've done enough research where you're able to provide some sort of resolution and when that resolution will be completed. So again, first, let your stakeholders know, communicate to them that there's an issue, there's a problem, we're behind, we're over budget, whatever the issue is, communicate that, get it out there, and let them know that you're working on it. If you don't have a resolution right then, let them know that, hey, we are addressing this, and I will be able to provide an update to you by end of day Friday. Okay. And sometimes it has to be sooner than that, depending on the type of issue that you're dealing with. You may have to go ahead and just work all night with your team to figure out something and provide an update the next day. But you have to determine that. Like, just come up with a reasonable plan in order to do your due diligence. But make sure there is a tremendous effort placed on that, right? Dependent, again, on the type of issue that you are encountering. And give that date of status reporting to your stakeholders. So once you've communicated that there is a problem, there's an issue, we're addressing it, and we'll get back with you as soon as possible, you must take the next step of understanding the problem of what has happened, what is going on, what has caused this project to be behind schedule, what has caused this project to be well over budget, what has caused or created this issue that you may have encountered. Whatever the case may be, you have to understand what the problem team is, or I'm sorry, what the problem is. And then you want to, it's not the team. Hopefully it's not the team, but then you want to meet with the team to gather the facts. Let's look at facts. It's not the time to point fingers. It's the time to gather all the facts. Now, and so you want to get to the root cause of it. That's the whole gist of this. Understand the problem so you can get to the root cause. What happened, right? And once you know what happened, that can give you better guidance on how to address and resolve. So communicate to your stakeholders to understand what the problem is by meeting with the team, gathering the facts, doing your due diligence to understand and get to the root cause. Once you understood the problem or determined the root cause, you want to identify ways to address the problem. There could be multiple courses of action to take. You have to identify what they are. Like I said, there may be a situation where your equipment does not arrive when you need it to arrive, and it has to get there. You are on the critical path. There is a drop deadline of July 22nd. And you have to have the equipment there because you need to go live for a Wi-Fi solution, because there's a huge event that's taking place at this grandiose facility. So you have to have the equipment there in time to configure and install, or install and configure. And so if that is a problem, because there's a delay, you have to identify ways to address that problem. Okay, the supplier says, okay, we couldn't get the equipment shipped. Okay, supplier, when can you get it shipped? And if it's extreme delays, like if it's not acceptable because you need to get it there by a certain time, then you have to maybe look at, are there any other vendors or suppliers? Now, this is where money comes into play. So you have to, maybe there's another supplier that can provide this equipment, these servers that we are trying to have on site for our client. So do your research, look up other suppliers who can get it there, or figure out, well, what is creating the delays with the existing supplier or vendor. So you really have to do your research to identify ways to address the problem, to resolve it. What are some possible solutions? And so once you've determined that, then you can determine what is the best course of action to take in order to get this particular server or servers on the site in a timely manner. Now, that may not be the issue. There could be other issues, right? That the project is just behind schedule because the lack of, maybe one of your primary resources became sick. Maybe they ended up with COVID, whatever the case may be. So other ways to identify ways to address the problem is meeting with your team to brainstorm those alternatives or those options to recover any delays if you're behind schedule. And some ways that you can actually help remedy that situation, you can look at, are there any other tasks that could be completed in parallel if you're having a delay because someone became sick? So now you have a resource who's sick and couldn't get their work done. So are there any other tasks that could be completed in parallel so you can go ahead and make up the slack because of the delays that have occurred? So this is called fast tracking in project management, when you look for other tasks in your project to make up some time that can go ahead and be worked and simultaneously with other tasks. So look for those opportunities. Then you can also look for any resources that could possibly come on board to help move things along quicker. No, not to jeopardize or compromise the quality, because typically maybe it will take one resource a week to develop the code. But if you have two resources to help move some of this, shorten the duration of this, because now they've split up the work, then it will only take 2.5 days to get that task done. So look for opportunities where you have resources that can help work on the work together, do the work, the actual task together. And this is called crashing, when you include more resources to a particular task to get it done quicker. So you have fast tracking or either crashing, or maybe if you just know there's no other way around this but having more time. If your deadline to complete the project is not concrete, or it's concrete, but if it's not immovable, meaning you can actually, it's okay if the date can be adjusted, meaning sometimes there are projects that they must be delivered by XYZ because there is a tremendous impact on the expectation of the project. And then there are other projects where it's okay, it's just a deadline based on, when you can complete the project based on all the tasks. Sometimes those deadlines are constraints, like we have to get it done. Sometimes the deadline is not a constraint, even though you know your project schedule, and this is based on all the tasks and the durations to complete the task. This is when we'll finish, but you can actually move that date out with the sponsor being okay. But you have to have approval, gain that approval in order to be able to push out the end date of the project to something that's more feasible. And so also something else you can look at is if there's an issue that could be the problem, right? While your project is in trouble, determine what it will take to resolve the issue. Say, for instance, the servers you ordered are out of stock. And I'm saying servers, because you're looking to install this new solution. And so, like I mentioned before, is there another supplier who could ship the servers at a reasonable time? There may be an extra cost. So now you're looking at, okay, well, we can't budge on this deadline, this date, but we're going to have to budge on the cost. So now, because we have to look at a different supplier, or we may have to have someone rush something out, expedite some equipment out to us, then of course there are going to be additional costs involved. So you have to weigh your pros and cons. And then of course, that's another change. So all of these changes, whatever your workarounds or solutions are, there will be some sort of cost in order to do so. Possibly. Now, if you can work tasks in parallel, that might not be a cost because now you've figured out a way, but it could possibly affect the quality. You really have to understand what you're dealing with in the alternatives that you have. You have to weigh your pros and cons on what's best. Should we be able to work tasks in parallel if we're trying to make sure we stay on schedule? Or should we crash, include some crashing in this, which means we're going to actually double up on our resources for a particular task, which again could be more money because now you're bringing more resources on to do the work. Or do you just go ahead and get approval from your stakeholders or your business sponsors to just extend the project because there's no way we can get it done in this time allotted? Or if there's an issue, you understand, well, what do we need to do to resolve the issue? And that could be extra costs, right? Typically it is. When you have an issue that has happened, there's typically going to be some cost involved to resolve the issue. Unless it's just internal labor, and that just means, okay, we need to work on this 12 hours straight, or whatever the case may be. Some other things may get delayed, but the priority is getting this issue resolved. There may not be a cost involved because that's internal labor. So it just really all depends. But again, this goes back to really looking at or identifying ways to address the problem. Once you've identified, okay, what could we do? Then you determine the best possible solution. So identify what can be done. What are the alternatives? What are the options? What are the options here in order to minimize the risk or get things back on track with this project? Determine what those options are, and then you select the best solution from those options. So step 3, determine what the resolution is. So based on your brainstorming and due diligence, you want to determine the best course of action to take in order to get your project back on schedule, get back under budget. And sometimes when you're over budget, what you have to do is just go ahead and request for more funding. Did I say under budget? When you're over budget, you have to go ahead and request for more funding, or you really need to call it out and say, hey, we're running out of funding here. We need a change request. We need to seek more funding to be able to complete this project. So that's something that has to be addressed. That may be your only alternative in that situation or option. So you must put in a request in order to increase the funding. But whatever the resolution is, like I said, it could be getting the project back on track. It could, or schedule, back on schedule, whether it is extending the schedule, or it could be, but prior to seeking that extension, look for ways to get your project back on schedule by either fast tracking or crashing the project Fast tracking again is actually working a task in parallel, finding those tasks that can be worked in parallel, and crashing is adding more resources to help you complete the task. And then you can also, so if you're trying to figure out how to get the project back on schedule, or how to get the project back within the budget, or how to, just resolve an issue, whatever the case may be, based on the trouble that you're in, determine what the best course of action is based on your brainstorming efforts. And then 4, once you've determined what approach you want to take in order to address whatever trouble you're having, you want to document and communicate those changes. What are you planning to do? So this is the new adjusted schedule based on this, because we're going to or your schedule may remain intact, but now we have a plan to add more resources. Or we had to go ahead and cancel the previous order with the servers with this vendor, and go ahead and request a new vendor or supplier to ship the servers for us. Whatever those steps are, those actions are that you've decided to take, document that information and communicate. This is what we're doing, and make sure the expectations are clear so people are on board and those changes are approved and accepted, right? And you can move forward. So once you've done that, then you want to act on it and implement the changes and for the plan. So it's great to go ahead and say, this is what we're going to do. We have a plan. So this goes back to when you first notified your stakeholders, and trust me, they are following this issue or these concerns. So it's so important you have given them an update on where you are with identifying the best course of action to take. But then at some point you come back, you follow up, and you say, hey, this is where we are. This is what we're going to do to resolve this or get this project back on track. Then you document that information and you make sure this is officially communicated. But then you have to get it done as agreed. That goes back to the original plan of the project, because once you have a plan in place, once you know what you're doing, you want to make sure you execute accordingly. So act on it and implement the plan changes. Implement the resolution. Move swiftly, not carelessly, but swiftly with quality, right? To be able to ensure that, okay, we are on these steps to take to make sure we get things back in order. We get this project back on track, or we address this particular issue. So whatever that case may be, after you've done your due diligence of initially communicating, understanding what the problem is or the root cause, identifying ways to address the problem, determining what the resolution is or the best course of action to take, documenting and communicating those changes, those action steps, and then act on it and implement the changes or the course of action. Act on it. So those are the fundamental steps in order to get your project back on track. And again, your project can be off track for a number of reasons, but those are your key steps to take to address schedule delays, to address budget issues, right? To address just any other issues with your project. Those are the steps you would take to get your project back on track. But do not neglect the communication aspect of it. Make sure your stakeholders are aware of what's going on and they are following along. You're giving them reasonable updates on what's going on with the steps we just mentioned. And then when you have a plan in place, because there's a process that you may have to go through in regards to the changes that you plan to make. So that goes up under your change control process. And that's another topic we can discuss down the road. But in regards to just how you would just get things back on track, communicate that we have a problem, identify the root cause, what's the issue, right? Determine what the solution is, document and communicate. You can do that together and then act on it. And so if you take those steps, trust me, you will be able to get your project back on track, or you will be able to resolve issues pretty quickly. In another topic, we can discuss how you can be proactive about minimizing those issues from occurring, and that's called risk management, because you can identify risks throughout your project, the likelihood that a certain event, typically negative events, that could happen. And then you can understand those triggers that could possibly cause that event to happen, what that probability is. And you can have mitigation plans in place to minimize the risk or be able to address. So you want to try to mitigate as much as possible to prevent these issues from occurring. But sometimes you can't catch everything during your risk management process. So when the issues occur, you have to pivot and go to the issue management process and managing those issues. So typically when projects are in trouble, it could be because of an issue, which is typically causing the schedule delays or the cost increases. And then you just have to know how to address. But these are the steps to help you address and get things back on track. So thank you so much for joining us tonight as we discuss how to get your project back on track, because your project is in trouble. But hopefully you can utilize these tips and be able to move forward and end up successfully driving the implementation and execution of your project, because you have properly planned and then you've addressed whatever snafus may have occurred, and then you can continue to move forward successfully. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in to PM Talks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.